Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Take, my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Elijah was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins.
Hello and welcome everybody to the next edition of our reading of the Divine Program of the World's History by Albert Close, today on this June 30th, 2019. And we're gathered together on a Sunday here across the Atlantic on the internet. And Jörg Listman's joining me from Belgium. Jörg, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bret, and welcome too.
Thanks. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
So grateful that you are there and you're willing to meet with me and do these sessions and continue on this journey into this very provocative history that I've never heard before. And I would imagine most of the listeners probably don't know a whole lot about it either. So we're just, ready and waiting to learn more.
Yeah, Albert Close often speaks of details of history that we haven't heard anywhere else before. That's true. Therefore, his book, The Divine Program of the World's History, is quite interesting. It is not only put together of other writings, as we know from Wordsworth and Birksworth and Birks-Smith, or what's his name is, and Henry Grattan Guinness.
Yes.
Yeah, Birks, and Wordsworth and all these people, and Henry Grattan Guinness and all these guys.
Oh, yeah.
But he also put in a lot of his own research on that, and a lot of comments on his own. And I'm still under the impression of what we read yesterday, so that's why I'm going back to where we stopped yesterday in our reading. We were reading this quote on page 155 in the book, 121 in the PDF, that comes from Roman Catholic Cardinal Manning in 1874, where he said, where he stated almost prophetically, 40 years before the outbreak of the Great War, as they call World War I, there is only one solution of the difficulty. And speaking of the difficulty, of course, that is the losing of the temporal power for the Pope. A solution I fear impending, and that is the terrible scourge of continental war. A war which will exceed the horrors of any of the wars of the First Empire, speaking of the pagan Roman Empire. And it is my firm conviction that in spite of all obstacles, the Vicar of Jesus Christ will be put again in his own rightful place. But that day will not be until his adversaries shall have crushed each other with mutual destruction. That's what he says. That day will not be until his adversaries shall have crushed each other with mutual destruction. This last sentence is a giving away of Jesuitical war tactics. Let the enemies of the papacy kill each other. And the papacy is the controlling power in the end. The papacy has control of the right. The papacy has control of the left. The papacy has control of the thesis. The papacy has control of the antithesis. And therefore it will control the synthesis, the outcome. And even though the Pope was not present in the peace negotiations in France, Versailles in 1918-1919, which we will learn a little bit later in this reading here, the Pope was pulling the strings, or the Jesuits were pulling the strings from behind. Let me assure you that. The outcome was all in their favor from the beginning to the end. This war, Cardinal Manning said, should bring in the power, the temporal power of the Pope again that has been taken from him in 1870. Well, interesting is that we see a 20-year period that is very profound. We have the ending of the First World War in 1818, almost 1819. I probably think this depends on, because it was in November of that year, it depends whether you see it as a solar year or a lunar year or whatever, or calendar year. And then 20 years later, in February of 1929, you had the restoring of the wound, as we can rely from the Bible in Revelation chapter 13. When the wound was healed, with a Lateran treaty Mussolini signed with the Vatican and gave the Vatican, or the Pope, back his temporal power in 1929, and another 10 years later, in 1939, you had the outbreak of the Second World War, which could be interpreted, if you see it through these lenses here, or through these glasses here like this, as a revenge of the Pope, for that they have taken away his temporal power, and now he is revenging himself, using Germany to bloodshed even more blood over all of Europe, because people called the First World War the Great War and the mother of all wars and all kinds of great names, but of course they had no idea that the sword of Damocles was still hanging above their heads. And when it came down and the Second World War came, we have had a bloodshed as we have never seen before in the history of mankind, and never seen since. But let me assure you that the coming World War, or the World War that we are in right now, because, saying World War III will come is just a denial of the fact that we are in World War III, at least since the time of 9/11/2001, but we have just not yet reached the hot phase of that war. And when the hot phase of that war is reached, bloodshed will be all around the world as never ever before it has been in mankind. And to give you an idea what's going to come, just visit the airport of Denver, take a look at the murals over there, take a look at the history the Jesuits give us in advance of what's going to humanity if, quote-unquote, humanity or mankind, better said, will not bow down to the supreme power of the Vicar of Christ who sits on his little golden throne in Rome, the seat of Babylon. But I know that you want to comment on this, Bret, so please.
Oh, yeah, well, I think it was in 2006, I was in the Denver airport, Jörg, and I had no idea what was around me. I didn't even really pay attention to it. I just was focused on something completely separate than that, And, these things are all around us all the time, and we don't notice them sometimes in different points in our lives. But, hey, that's life, Sometimes you just don't notice the elephant in the room until it starts making some noise, and then you notice it. It's kind of scary, actually, knowing that you're living amongst so much wickedness and it just surrounds you. But Jesus said not to be afraid of men. We're not to be afraid of these different devices. These are devices. Men are using devices. The Bible talks about this in the book of Proverbs, that we shouldn't be. Well, let's see. I'll quick look it up here. There's just a lot of different mechanisms that are set up to entangle us into a system that provokes us and makes us fight against each other. I mean, that's what's going on today. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious in politics, and that's why, I can't stand politics. I just, people wonder, well, why aren't you voting? Well, that's how these wars are fomented, aren't they, Jörg? Is through different political means. You have the papacy in there since 1929. What has changed since then? Not much.
No,
Not
just
much.
the power of the Pope has become increasingly more powerful.
It's on steroids now.
Especially since you have the signing of 179 nations on this earth of concordats with the Vatican in the meantime. That's a lot of work that was done, right?
Oh, it's even in the book of Job. In chapter 5, verse 12, he disappointeth the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. That's a very interesting verse right there. That's the first place it appears in the Bible, devices. And then the last place is in 2 Corinthians. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. Okay, so we are to study Satan's devices. We are to know what they are, but we are not to partake in them.
As we are living in the world, but are not to be of this world.
That's right. That's right. So when the Bible talks about devices, it's not talking about cell phones.
No.
It's talking about, well, I mean, one could ignorantly think, well, yeah, those are devices. Yeah, they are.
It's like when they talk about the mark of the beast, they don't speak of an RFID chip.
No, that's right, Jörg. We talked about that yesterday in our Bible study. It is a spiritual mark. And that comes with discernment.
Yeah, because the Bible is a spiritual book.
Yes.
You have to take many things of the Bible absolutely literally. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. When Lot went out with his wife from Sodom and Gomorrah, and she turned because she couldn't let go. She turned into a pillar of salt. That you have to take absolutely literally.
Jörg, if you're under the influence of the Gnostics, you'll never take anything literally. That's the point here. Learning against learning. They've pushed this so far that, 99.9% of the people on the face of the earth possibly would never take the Bible literally right now.
No, but the point is, brother, that many people take too many things of the Bible literally. They don't have the discernment.
True.
They don't have the discernment to what to take spiritually or what to understand spiritually, and what to understand figuratively, or what to understand. How do we just say that?
Yes.
Literally.
Yes.
They don't have the discernment for that.
No.
And that's the problem. And why don't they have that discernment? Well, because they don't read and study the Bible. Yeah, exactly.
And they're not studying independently of the institutional church.
Right.
When you allow that institutional church to tell you what to think, sorry to put it that way, but, there's nothing that ticks me off more than someone telling me how to think. I don't mind being corrected. I don't mind having someone, get in my face and say, hey, look, what are you talking about? I don't mind that. But when someone's telling you what to think, that's an insult. Right, Jörg?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty much. And we're not here to insult anybody. We're just saying, hey, consider this, please. So anyway, look up devices in the Bible, study it for yourself. There's plenty of really good lessons to learn about Satan. Satan's for real, all right. The adversary's for real, all right. And he's trying to foment division between the body of Christ, and he succeeded throughout history. And here we are today in 2019, and it couldn't be worse. Could it? Could it be worse than what it already is? Maybe it could be.
Oh.
Maybe there's more that could happen.
Oh, brother, it can be so much worse than it is today.
Yeah.
There will come a time you will long for the time that you have right now. And see how wonderfully we had it, at this moment.
Yeah, that's right, Jörg. Yep, that's right.
But let's go back to the book here. I just think that this last sentence, but the day will not be until his adversaries shall have crushed each other with mutual destruction, that this is really, for at least the people who studied this part a little bit, telling us that this is the Jesuitical tactic. Samuel C. Gibb, in his book, when he was writing this book on the King James Bible, I forgot the name right now. I read that on the Hour of the Truth for many parts.
That's right.
An Understandable History of the Bible. It is from Samuel C. Gibb. He said in his book, the papacy is like the lad that says to person number 1 when he wants to fight with person number 2, give me your coat, I'll hold it, and whatever the outcome is, I return the jackets, but in the meantime I will just hold the jackets. So I stand afar off, out of the action, and you and him do the fight, like in Rulers of Evil it is also mentioned, as Cassius says, you and him do the fighting and I'll take the honors, by the way. And that's the way that the papacy acts and reacts, It controls the power of nation A, it controls the power of nation B. Both of these nations are enemies in the core sense of the Vatican, of the papacy. So he stirs these two enemies instead of against him, against each other, and is the laughing third person of that tumult.
I got to add a little bit of fire to this, Jörg.
Yeah,
a little bit of fire is Matthew chapter 23, the first verses.
Okay.
The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat.
Just a second.
Therefore,
Matthew
all
23.
they bid you. Yes. Matthew 23. Go ahead, Jörg.
No, you can read. I just want to put it in picture.
Yes. So this is Jesus. He says, Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Now, we were talking about devices earlier, and we can look at what the scribes and Pharisees use as devices. And I think this has reference to this verse right here. Saying to the scribes and the Pharisees that sit in Moses' seat, all therefore whatsoever they bid you, observe. That observe and do. Okay, so when I first encountered this study, I was looking at the session, the joint session of Congress in 2015, when Pope Francis came to deliver his speech. And my jaw just hit the floor because he pointed up to that stupid little thing that device they got up there in Congress with Moses on it. And if you look at that thing, it looks like Moses got two little bumps on the top of his head. I mean, it's creepy looking, isn't it? Yeah, there it is. Look at those bumps on the top of his head. Why would they do that?
Like he is the devil, eh? Horns are coming out of his head.
Yes.
Eh?
2 horns like a lamb, but spake as a dragon? Ring a bell?
Good point.
Yeah,
brother.
this
Good
wicked
point.
nation that they're fomenting here. I mean, this is I think Jörg, you even pointed out long time ago the laurel around this bust. They call it a bust, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So that signifies Roman authority, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you said that, Jörg. I remember listening.
According to this bust, Moses was a Roman agent.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, everyone's trying to claim that, that what they believe is the truth. And, Satan likes to use the same argument, doesn't he? Satan wants you to believe that what he's doing is the truth. And that's what the scribes and Pharisees are all about today, aren't they? They're trying to utilize mankind, right, to do the bidding of their hierarchy, really. And they get it their way. They get it their way because no one takes the time to study it and figure out that these people are just usurping the power of Christ. And the people just sit around and, oh, it's so beautiful, it's so pretty, and look at the Pope, he is so kind and gentle, and they don't stop to think about the actual biblical facts.